Welcome to Aurora Connects Season 2.
Yeah.
This is episode 1 for Friday, August 14th, 2020. And you get just me and Josh. So I'm Monique Williams, Associate Artistic Director of Aurora Theater. And as always, I'm joined by Josh Costello, Artistic Director of Aurora Theater. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Dawn. Hey, everybody.
We're still taking comments in the chat box on Facebook, in the chat box on YouTube. We would still love it if you would like us and subscribe to our channel. And you can always email us thoughts, questions, suggestions for quotes, guests you'd love to have on the show. We're already booking out for season 3. So feel free to email us at connects@auroratheater.org, connects@auroratheater.org. And if you want to take us on the go, you can listen to this in an audio format as a podcast. Right now, we're available on Stitch, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
And we are now in our 2020-2021 season, which is not the season we expected it to be, but it's still happening, and some really exciting stuff is coming up. So I hope you will check out information about our season, including the upcoming audio drama, The Flats, which we've commissioned from 3 remarkable local playwrights. Go to auroratheater.org and click on memberships. You can join as an annual member or as a monthly member and get access to all of the online programming that we are putting together. That is the best way for you to stay in touch with Aurora and all the things that we're doing for you during this season. So please check that out. And while you're there, you can make a donation by clicking the donate button at the top right of the page. That's auroratheater.org. Thank you so much.
We have a lot of wonderful guests lined up already for this season 2 of Aurora Connects. But today, it's just Josh and I. We're going to take a little deeper dive in interviewing one another about our backgrounds, what got us into theater, how we ended up at Aurora. So just 2 Berkeley kids catching up on a Friday afternoon, eh, Josh?
Yeah.
So let's see. Josh, there's a question here.
You're going to ask me a question first, or should I ask you one first?
However you want to play it, boss.
I want to know. I want to know a little bit more about you, Dawn. I know you went to Berkeley High, and you grew up in Berkeley and Oakland, and then you went to. You have a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees.
Yeah.
You went to Cal State East Bay. You went to SF State. You went to UMass Amherst.
Yeah.
And you were the associate artistic director at Impact Theater.
Yep.
Which was the company that I founded way back in 1996. But we weren't there at the same time. You were there when Melissa Hillman had taken over as there's me in my Impact Theater T-shirt. That was the final Impact Theater performance the night that they finally, after 20 years, closed down. But that was and that T-shirt is from our very first year, designed by Slater Penny. It's a fork being stuck into an electrical socket, which was our our metaphor for what theater should be like. And you're electrocuting yourself with art. But we have that in common. And then you've directed all over the country. You worked at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I forget what your title was there. What was your title at Oregon Shakespeare?
Artistic Associate. Well, first I was the Phil Killian Directing Fellow. Then I was the Artistic Associate. And as part of that, I became the interim Fair Program Manager.
Okay. Hey, and we're apparently stuck on this image of me in my Impact Theater T-shirt from a few years ago. So hopefully we'll get back to our faces. I'm talking soon, and we'll see. This is live theater, everybody. There's technical, but there we are. All right. And then after Ashland, you moved down here. So I want to know how growing up in Berkeley affected you as an artist.
Oh my goodness. Well, Berkeley is such a sort of progressive liberal bubble. I mean, I think as you mature into adulthood, you learn that it's not quite that broad a stroke, but certainly for me, I grew up in the Flats. So I grew up in South Berkeley, just below San Pablo Park. And I'm the product of an interracial marriage. So I grew up in a very kind of culturally diverse neighborhood, and I went to Berkeley Public Schools. So I think I kind of always understood the world as one that's full of possibility. Berkeley felt very radical. I found myself saying just yesterday that I'm always puzzled when people set up this dichotomy between like an arts organization and a social justice organization, because for me, theater has only ever been about social justice. And I definitely think that's the Berkeley kid in me, that, you know, we walked out against the Gulf Wars, and we walked out when there was the, you know, the Rodney King riots, and for the measures 209 and affirmative action and 3 strikes laws, like, and I'm talking about like 7th, 8th grade, walking out of class, you know, like organized movements where it's like, when the clock strikes this, we put our pencils down, we get up and we walk out, and having teachers that sort of were in support of that. So I only can think of a time where like doing theater was about also being politically motivated. The first play I did in high school was Douglas Turner Ward's Day of Absence, which I read a quote from the week we had the mayor of Berkeley on, you know, and it's a play for a Black cast to wear white face and, you know, enact this day where what happens when all the Black people in town disappear. And so I was 14 doing that play.
Yeah.
And I think only in Berkeley, like I did a Susan Laurie Parks play my senior year in high school. Like I got to college and nobody had even heard of Susan Laurie Parks. This is long before Top Dog Underdog. So Berkeley is very much like in the that radical Berkeley spirit is very much in the fiber of my art making. Yeah. What about you, Josh? Because you're also a Berkeley kid. And let me see, I could rattle off your resume a little bit too.
All right.
You went off to Boston, to go to college. Then you went to grad school at UW. Well, first you founded Impact.
Yeah. So right after Boston University, I moved back to Berkeley, and with a bunch of people started Impact Theater.
Yeah, which was my first professional home. So again, thanks to you, I got a good start. Melissa Hellman, one of my great mentors and friends. Then after you were AD of Impact for like 4 or 5 years.
4 years, yeah.
Yeah, and then you decided to go to grad school to make the big leap, and you went to UW, University of Washington. And then after that, you went and spent some time working in LA.
Yeah, my wife was going to school at UCLA. Yeah.
So you worked down there at some theaters down there, and then you all wanted to start a family, so you came back to Berkeley to be close to the Rents. That's what.
Yeah, my wife grew up in Berkeley as well, so we've got both sets of grandparents in town and very actively involved in helping us raise our kids. And you know, it's a little harder now that we can't you know, physically get close to them, but we go and visit in backyards. But the parents have been extremely helpful in making our careers possible. You know, that we have had a lot of support in terms of childcare. One of our children is homeschooled, and the grandparents are involved in that as well. So we're very, very lucky.
And then you worked all over the place. You were at Marin Theater Company. You had a short stint at Marin Shakespeare. You've been at Aurora now 8 years, 1 year as artistic director, but 7 years as artistic associate, literary manager, casting director, many of the things I now do. So how has being a Berkeley kid impacted you as an artist?
The way I like to say it is that one of the things that you learn when you grow up in Berkeley is that your job is to make the world a better place, right? And it's a lot of it is how, you know, it's about self-actualization in that context. What's your way of making the world a better place? What can you do? And different people do it in different ways, depending on their abilities and skills and interests and passions. And so I discovered very early on that I had a passion for theater, and, you know, perhaps that had to do with liking attention. And I was an actor all through school, and then you know, morphed and became more and more interested in directing and teaching as well. But it really, the thing that I saw that very early on was that theater is awesome and does something that no other art form does. When you have people in the same room as the actors, there's something visceral and something really powerful that you can do in terms of telling a story that way. And that experience of being in the room with the other audience members, with the actors all together is fundamentally different than watching a movie, right? So, and I loved it. I fell in love with it. And then I noticed that, like, oh, wow, none of my friends like theater at all. And like, we go to, see a play at a big theater, a student matinee or something, and it feels like we're going into somebody else's space. And it became very clear that, this is something that I can do, right? I have access to this art form that I think makes people happy and makes people better people. It makes communities better. It makes communities stronger. It brings people together. And my generation as a whole is missing out on that. And so I became very interested in how do we claim this art form for the next generation? And that's what Impact Theater was all about, was how do we claim this art form for the next generation? And I embarrassingly slowly began to realize that that lots of people don't have access to theater. It's not just about generation. It's about class. It's about race. It's about having enough money to buy these very expensive tickets to come see theater. And I got very interested in how do we tear down these barriers? How do we make the world a better place by making theater more central to our culture and to our society? So I worked for 5.5 years at Marin Theater Company as the artistic director for expanded programs. And a lot of that work was about reaching out to communities of color, communities, what we called underserved communities that had not traditionally been a part of the Marin Theater Company family, and finding ways to build real relationships with those communities and do art, bring art to them, bring them to the theater, just break down this us-them barrier and find ways to include more people in this art form that I find so meaningful and wonderful. And that's so growing up in Berkeley, that sort of brought it all together. That it's not just about getting attention; it's about using this form to make the world a better place.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Josh, at what point did you decide that being Aurora Theater's next artistic director might be a move you wanted to make?
Well, so I'd been working here for several years, and I love this company. I love our space. I love directing in our space. I've always loved the thrust configuration as a director, right? Just as an artist, that idea of having the audience on three sides of the stage allows for a lot of things that I really love about theater. That allows for the kind of storytelling that I really love, where first of all, that visceral connection is emphasized, right? You're so close to the actors. You're not looking up at them on a raised level. You're not looking at them inside a picture frame. You're really right there in the room with them. And also because the actors are in a thrust, you have to keep moving them around, right? So that their back is always to somebody. But because you have to keep moving them around, it means that the storytelling is really granular, right? Because people change positions when something changes in their relationship, right? So you're forced to make really specific choices all through the script as to how the beat changes work and how the transitions work and how the steps of the conversation proceed, how people are shifting tactics. And that, I find that really rewarding as a director, as opposed to a proscenium space where it's often better to sort of like get them in their relationships and leave them there for longer chunks. So I really love working here artistically as an artist. On top of that, it's my hometown, right? It's Berkeley. And I love that our audience is so filled with highly educated, really engaged people who care passionately about issues and who are informed and want to argue. It's really, our talkbacks are so good here because the people, it's not just like, how did you learn all those lines, right? It's always like, oh, well, actually, I'm a professor in this exact field, and the way that this happened in the story is not quite right because it actually is like this. And then somebody else is like, oh, well, but you're not considering this other, and it gets to these really deep conversations. So I think our audience is fantastic. Similarly to what I was saying before, I think there's a missing piece, right? I think that Aurora has really thrived in part because our audience is, able to pay for our subscriptions, is able to make donations. They've been very generous, and we've really done a great job over our 28-year history of serving that audience. But there's a lot of people who don't come to Aurora, right? There's a lot of people who can't afford the price of our tickets and our subscriptions. And we offer discounted tickets. We have rush tickets. We have pay what you can nights for every show. But I'm really excited about the work of finding ways to tear down barriers, right? Finding ways to make Aurora truly a storyteller for a broader section of our community and making our community stronger in that way. I think we're ideally positioned for it. I think we have the resources to do this kind of work in a really exciting way. And it's not been something that has been historically the number one priority for Aurora. But I'm really, so when Tom, my predecessor, he and I got along very well. He's a wonderful guy. And I really appreciate the culture that he created among the artists at Aurora. It's really set up for artists to do their best work. Tom always said, we keep the drama on the stage. He really has a great touch with giving artists the room to do their best work without micromanaging, but also being really supportive and hands-on. It's remarkable, and I've learned a lot from him, and I try to emulate him in a lot of ways. When he announced that he was stepping down, I really thought about, is this something that I want to do? Part of, my wife works full time. She's a research faculty at Cal. We've got 2 kids. One of them's homeschooled. Our lives are very full. I've always thought I wanted to be an artistic director again, but was this going to be right? Is Aurora the right place for me and what I wanted to do? And I thought about it and talked with my wife about it quite extensively. And ultimately we decided that I would apply for the job, and I would be very honest with the board about my vision and how it's different from Tom's vision. And if the board wanted to do what I wanted to do, then great. And if they weren't interested in what I wanted to do, and they wanted to hire somebody who would more sort of stay the course, then great, they should do that, and I should not be that person, right? And so I decided I would apply, and I'm so glad that it was a real process they did a national search. I was one of many candidates that they took very seriously. There were many rounds of interviews, first over phone and Zoom, and then in person. And it was in no way a sure thing that it would be me. And as much as I would have loved to have been just saying, hey, let's just make a succession plan and hand it off to Josh, I'm really grateful that that's not what happened, and because it forced me to really articulate for myself and for the board and for the staff and for the community what my vision was and how that may have changed, over the last, since the last time I sort of went through a process like that. And in doing that, I was able to have some really deep conversations with the board about the work that I wanted to do. And the board was very supportive, more supportive than I expected. And they ended up offering me the position, and I was very, very pleased to take it. What made you, Dawn, want to be the associate artistic director at this company? You had been living up in Ashland for a long time. You had been directing big productions up there. And now you're back in the Bay Area working at Aurora. Why did you make this move?
Yeah. Well, I've known for quite some time that I was interested in artistic leadership. I have goals of being an artistic director one day, if that's the language we continue to use into the future, as we are experiencing radical paradigm shifts in the theater right now. And as it happened, Bill Rausch, who was the artistic director up at Ashland, had announced that he was leaving. And his departure also fell in time with when my daughter Jordan would be graduating from high school. So I knew, I think people who work on artistic staffs have an understanding that when the leadership changes, there's often cabinet changes. So I think many of us on the artistic staff sort of knew that the new AD would come in and likely want to put together her own team. At that time, we didn't know who the new AD would be. It's since been announced in Nataki Garrett, who I'm a huge fan of. I think she's so tremendous. So I, at that time, started kind of putting feelers out. I applied for plenty of jobs. I applied for a lot of AD jobs myself. But I knew that if I didn't get a job offer, the place I wanted to be was home. I knew that emotionally, once Jordan, that's my daughter, left Ashland to go to college, it's just me and her, that I wouldn't really want to stay in Ashland, especially without any sort of position at the festival. So I said, well, if I don't get any job offers, I'm going to go home. So emotionally, I had already been preparing myself to move back home. Then, as it turns out, you were announcing the position. You invited me for a coffee. We never did get that coffee, but we had a great chat. And
we've had some Thai food since then.
we are good for the Thai food. And I mean, as you know, I was in the running for some other positions, so I did get a competing job offer, but then you made me this offer, and I knew that job offer was academic, and I knew that I wanted to perhaps stay in the professional realm rather than just pivot to the academic realm. And it just felt like everything was in perfect alignment because I had been attending Aurora as a patron for years. Many of my best friends in the whole wide world have worked at Aurora, plenty of them under your care. And so Aurora is very highly regarded. So I was excited by the prospect that it would allow me to come home, which is where I wanted to be emotionally, but also it was an artistic leadership position in a professional theater, which is also what I was really craving. And there's things that we do at Aurora that I miss from working somewhere as big as OSF, where we were doing musicals and Shakespeare, of course, which is not stuff that we are doing yet at Aurora, but it's certainly things that you and I explore in conversation. But I also, like you, really love the thrust configuration. I love the immediacy, the intimacy of that. Tyrone Guthrie is sort of famous for saying that the superior audience actor relationship. And while I don't enjoy the word superior, I do tend to agree that relationship between performer and audience is one that really allows for kind of a deep exchange. I've said it a lot in the last few weeks that hearts beating in time and us breathing together is sort of the reason we come together to do live theater. And I think that our space allows that so magically. So yeah, I've been a fan of Aurora, and it's so great to call it my theater home. Yeah. Even though I haven't been in the building only once in 21 weeks.
I know. I get to be here every week for this and depositing checks, and it's nice, but it's also really sad. I walk into the theater and I tear up. It's really, that's such a great space, and it's so sad for it to be sitting empty for so long.
Josh, tell me a little bit more about what you love about directing.
Oh my gosh. I like systems. I'm fascinated by the way things work together. And directing a play is like constructing this machine that has to run in a certain way. And there's a logic to it that really appeals to me. I also, my hobby right now is designing board games. And there's something like remarkably similar about the two activities, right? You're not the one doing it, right? I'm not the actor. I'm like putting all the pieces together and helping people figure out how they fit together in such a way that the machine can roll on and in a way that is, efficient or beautiful or effective. And so there's something about, you have to, I think your job as a director is to articulate the idea of the play to the audience, right? The job of the play, right? The playwright has the idea, right? And articulates it in the form of the script. And then the director has to articulate that idea to the cast, to the designers, right? To the team. And then ultimately through that work, the story of the play gets told to the audience. And so I love narrative. I love the way that idea of just putting pieces together, and that work is, I mean, specifically what I love about theater, specifically what I love about directing is being in the room and having to have my whole brain so engaged because I'm having to hold so much in my head at once. I'm having to hold the script, the story we're telling, the effect it's going to have on the audience, the different choices we've already made, and those moments of like, who needs to be in focus for this line, right? Who the actor wants to do something that is different than what I had imagined, and is what they are offering better, or is it, or do I need to stick to my guns and encourage them to do it this other way? And the answer to that question has to come out of this combination of preparation and research and thought, but also impulse and instinct and feeling it out. And that idea of using your whole brain and being so engaged in the moment that it's like nothing else. So that's what I love about it. I love telling stories. I love being able to engage an audience and put something together that from start to finish will hold the attention and will communicate ideas and feelings and cause people create meaning, right? Create change, create beauty.
Josh, we pulled some photos of some of your
oh my gosh.
Directing triumphs. So why don't you tell us about a couple of your Aurora hits, like Eureka Day, perhaps?
Oh my gosh, I love that place so much, Dawn. So there's Eureka Day. Oh, that set is so beautiful. Look at the window. It's like we're in the Berkeley Hills looking out at the bay. Jeff Rowlings did such a good job with the lights, and Richard Olmsted with the set. So this was a play that we commissioned from Jonathan Spector. There's the cast. He was one of our early Originate and Generate commissions, and he had done a bunch of plays for the Global Age Project. And we said, Jonathan, what do you want to write a play about? This was when Tom was artistic director. And Jonathan said, well, I've been thinking a lot about the quote debate about vaccines and anti-vaxxers and why people have decided that vaccines aren't safe and they don't want to vaccinate their kids and they won't listen to science. And so he wanted to do interviews with people, and he interviewed a bunch of people who were on all sides of the spectrum in terms of the supposed argument about vaccines. I keep saying supposed in quotes because there is no real debate about it among scientists, right? Vaccines are safe and effective. But there's a sizable segment of people who on all ends of the political spectrum, right, who are against vaccines. And he was fascinated by that you could be a good Berkeley liberal and believe in the science of climate change, but not believe in the science of vaccines, and how interesting it was that people, that as a parent, that people who agree on so many things can disagree on this one issue. And so he wrote several drafts and wrote this play, and it was really important to me that we bring in actors and designers who were parents in the East Bay, right? This was a really authentic piece of storytelling, where it was a play set in Berkeley about a private school in Berkeley that was going through to set their vaccination policy during a mumps outbreak at the school, and the characters of the parents and on the board executive committee and the head of the school, the costume designer designed the costumes all around, her friends and the other parents at her daughter's preschool. And, the scenic designer is here as well, Richard Olmsted, and Maggie Whitaker was the costume designer, and the actors Elizabeth Carter and Lisa Ann Porter are both, raising kids in the East Bay. So it was a really powerful story. And then it was this play that was so funny. It had this scene at the end of the first act that was an online, Facebook live conversation that goes completely off the rails. And it was the funniest thing I've ever directed. And that ended the first act. And then it took a really serious turn in the second act. And it was it felt like exactly the kind of work that I was talking about before, where it's telling a story that is specific to our community, has global resonance, right? That speaks to this idea of what do we do when we disagree on the facts, right? How do we reach consensus? How do we make any decision? How do we make any progress as a society or as a group when we are operating in different realities and have different senses of the facts? And the play had something to say about that. It said, you know what, you just have to, if you can't get somebody else to agree with you about the facts and they're just wrong, right? You can't compromise, and B, it's tragic, right? So even though the people on the side of science, who I perceived as being the good guys, were victorious, the play was also very sympathetic to the ways in which that process was a huge problem and was quite tragic, and that the people on the other side are real people with real feelings, with real reasons for feeling the way they do. And so it's that play just hit it out of the park in so many ways. So I was really, really proud of that one.
Yeah, and it sounds like it will continue. It had just had its like New York premiere.
Yeah.
But as we move through COVID and life going forward, it sounds like it will continue to be really relevant, because I'm hearing data that suggests people won't come back to the theater until there's a vaccine. But then I'm also hearing data that most people won't take a vaccine. so it will continue to be a very relevant play. And it started at Aurora. It was an Aurora commission in a program that you and Tom really built up together. So that's dope.
I love that model. I really do. I think that, one of the things that I said a lot in my interview for the job was that, there were some candidates who were nationally connected in a way that I am not as much, and who were talking about bringing in, nationally recognized theater artists. And there's all kinds of reasons why that might be great. I'm much more interested in local artists and having our work be so important that it then gets picked up nationally and have it go in that direction, right? That's there are some really amazingly talented artists in the Bay Area, and I love that Aurora is a home for them. I want to look at some pictures from stuff you've directed too, Dawn. What do we have here? What is this one?
Piano Lesson.
The Piano Lesson. You love that play. How many times have you directed that play?
I love that play. I've directed it twice. And these photos are from the production that I just did in February at Le Petit Theater in New Orleans. And it actually had to close a week or so early because of shelter-in-place orders. But I'm a huge August Wilson fan. The man, the myth, the legend, with all the complications, and Piano Lesson in particular. It's not my favorite August Wilson play, but it has a particular resonance for me because it really is his kind of most feminist. It's a stretch, but on the Wilson spectrum, it leans a little more feminist than some of his other works. And it's that beautiful integration of music and sort of what I call heightened realism. Because there are elements of the supernatural and there's ritual, and I think so many people who aren't inside Wilson's work just think that it's just this like realism, but it's not, because there's always this conjuration of the ancestors, which is what is so pertinent there in the Piano Lesson. It's such a beautiful play, and to do that particular production in the South, because Wilson has the 10-year cycle that's really looking at migration of Black folks in America from the South to the North, and Piano Lesson sits right in this interesting decade. It's his play that's set in the 30s, and so to do it in the South with a cast full of actors who are Southerners was such a gift to me, because as we already talked about, I'm a Berkeley girl, right? Essentially, I'm a Yank, and so it was such a gift for me to be there for the 5.5 weeks to build the production. So to just experience the culture. I was there during Mardi Gras. I got to go visit the Whitney Plantation. So culturally, but also just to be in the room with those actors and to experience them get to be their authentic selves in a play that was written for them. Such a gift.
And Dawn, you are going to be leading a book club for people who are members of Aurora Theater Company this season, right? Once a month, you'll be talking about a different August Wilson play. Tell us about this book club.
Yeah, we're going to spend a year with August. So once a month, we're going to look at a different August Wilson play and then have a sort of webinar / seminar. I want it to be as conversational as the technology will allow, but we'll each month discuss these plays. We'll discuss them in their context, for the time period, but we will also look at them at, you know, what Wilson was doing when he wrote them. He was writing the bulk of his work in the 80s and 90s, and we'll look at what resonance they might have for us today. And I wanted to sort of approach this Pittsburgh cycle, the century cycle, chronologically, not in the way Wilson wrote them, but in the decades they cover. So we're going to move through the cycle chronologically, starting with Gem of the Ocean. And I'll get to geek out about August Wilson with anyone who has a membership and wants to come along on the journey. I think it's going to be great fun. And I hope it gets Aurora closer to producing a Wilson play in the years to come. I know we have a lot of competing priorities in terms of how we program plays, but it would be great for Aurora to join the ranks of theaters who have produced August Wilson, and even better that we've produced Dominique Morisseau first.
Yeah, that's right.
While I'm on that, Josh, we did get a question in the comments of someone wanting you to expand a little bit more about what your vision for Aurora is, and specifically how that relates to how we program seasons at Aurora.
So I think the first thing that anybody says when you ask them about Aurora is they talk about our intimacy, right? The intimacy of the space. And the way, when I first started working for Tom, and my job was literary manager, and part of that meant reading plays and helping select plays for the season. And I asked, well, what are the criteria we're looking for? What is it? What makes an Aurora show? And what Tom said was, you know, that it's plays that offer opportunities for detailed, nuanced acting, that take advantage of our intimate space in that way. And then on top of that, plays that give the audience some kind of intellectual question or puzzle, something to struggle with, something to talk about afterwards, that it's not just fluffy entertainment, right? That it's a play that has something to say and that has an intellectual dimension to it. And I mean, those are both things that I love, right? I love those things, right? I think over the years, I mean, I think certainly when Aurora started, you know, there was a reputation that I certainly shared as, you know, the person running the like young rock and roll theater company Impact around the same time Aurora was getting started, you know, that we were the theater for the young folks and Aurora was the theater for the old folks was the way a lot of people saw it, right? And then there was a little bit of a reputation for stodginess, right? That Aurora did a lot of Shaw, right? And I love Shaw, but it's, you know, it's a little different than some of the other things that I've directed. And I love, you know, so I think, and what I have been saying to the board and as we've been, you know, going through season planning, is that I want to retain that emphasis on detailed, nuanced acting. I love the idea of retaining this emphasis on plays that have something to say, right? Plays that are not just entertainment, that, you know, occasionally we do something fun, sure, funny. In Importance of Being Earnest, it's hard to make a case for that being like a deep play about a big intellectual idea, though there are things that you can pull out of that play, and I hope that we did to some degree with it. And it certainly has language that is deeply engaging. So I want to keep all those things, but I also want to open it up to tell stories about more different kinds of people and more different kinds of experiences. I think that, you know, we've over the last, you know, 10, 12, 15 years, Aurora has done more and more playwrights of color and had more actors of color on our stage. And I want to continue moving in that direction and moving faster in that direction. And I want to see more young people on our stage. I want to see more people of color on our stage. I want to see more people with disabilities on our stage. I want to see more people from all different walks of life telling all different kinds of stories that still have that Aurora thing, right? Because I think that, you know, when I was a teenager, right, and I was talking about how none of my friends wanted to go see the theater, it was because they didn't recognize themselves on stage, right? They didn't see stories that were meaningful to their lives. And I think that the content needs to be relevant, right? It needs to reflect the world that we're living in right now, and it needs to move the conversation forward. I think that's the kind of thing I was thinking about before COVID, right? And we got to program our first season together, Dawn, and then
Yes.
we had to cancel it. But those shows are still out there, and I'm so proud of that season we put together, and so looking forward to getting some of those plays at least on our stage. But since COVID, the world has changed. The conversation has changed, right? There's certainly the racial justice conversation in this country has changed, but even just the conversation about individualism versus the collective good has changed, right? There are huge conversations that are happening nationally and internationally today that are different than the conversations that were happening before the pandemic. And when we do come back and when we can reopen, and even in the stories that we are telling right now while we're closed, right? The audio drama that we've commissioned, the new plays that we're developing, we need stories that are going to address the world as it is. Every play that was written before 2020 is going to feel very dated after the pandemic. We need to, and I'm not just talking about people aren't wearing masks or not, right? It's what are the themes? What are the stories? So I'm looking for plays that continue to please our existing audience the way that they always have, that offer the same kind of wonderful opportunities for nuanced acting, intellectual engagement, big ideas, right? Plays that give you something to talk about, that give you something to argue about on the way home, and plays that stick with you, right? But also plays that are more, more plays that are contemporary, more plays that are looking forward and moving the conversations forward and that are relevant to people's lives right now.
Exciting. Josh, I want to look at some more of your work that you've done. And
Okay.
just recently, Custom Made Little Brother available in a sort of encore streaming production. And that is one of my best friends in the whole wide world, Marissa Kelty Muter Spa.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Little Brother and why Custom Made wanted to do a little encore streaming.
Oh, I love that show so much. That's Daniel Petzold there, and Corey Sensoprano is in that as well. So there's Corey. So this was a novel by Cory Doctorow called Little Brother that came out several years ago now. And I read the novel and just loved it so much. It's a young adult novel, and it's sort of this political, slightly science fiction thriller, coming of age love story, and it's set in San Francisco, and it's about a group of teenagers who are sort of teenage hackers and or troublemakers, digital troublemakers, and then a terrorist attack blows up the Bay Bridge, and some of these teenagers get swept up by the Department of Homeland Security because they're out and about after everybody's supposed to be sheltering in place, and after one of them is released, he starts a revolutionary movement online among young people. Their motto is "Don't trust anyone over 25," and fights back against a Department of Homeland Security crackdown, an unconstitutional crackdown following this terrorist attack. And it was written very much in reaction to September 11th and the Patriot Act and all of the technology. The author Cory Doctorow is a very important thinker in the realm of information technology and the politics of information technology, and he's fantastic. He's written a bunch of books. He writes fiction and nonfiction, and the book, all the technology in the book is real, right? And it's set maybe in the future, but it's all technology that could exist today. And talking about all kinds of wonderful stuff. And so I realized, I read the book and then realized, oh, wait a second, you could do this with, one actor playing the main character and then two other actors playing everybody else. And that would be so fun. And so I wrote I emailed the writer, I emailed the playwright and said, hey, or the novelist. And I said, hey, what would you think about me turning this into a play? And 5 minutes later, he wrote back and he was like, sure, talk to my agent. And I was like, okay. And the agent had a lot of questions.
Of course.
And basically I had to sort of do it on spec and try to get a theater interested before they would give their full approval. And I got, SF Playhouse did a couple of readings of it, developmental readings of it, and then eventually Custom Made pulled the trigger on it. And we did the world premiere. It was right after Occupy, which ended up informing the script. Adapting a novel is, a lot got left out, but it was really, really fun. And there ended up being like teenage kids who were fans of the novel who got their parents to bring them to a play, right? Which was awesome. Made me so happy. And traditional theater goers loved it. And the teenagers who saw it loved it. And we made a video of it. You know, it was like me 3 separate nights holding the camera in 3 separate places and then editing it together. And so the sound is not great and it's, you know, a little janky, but it's, you know, you get the sense of it. And we got a great team of designers. Chris Houston did the sound, and it was, you know, really did some amazing work. So I'm really proud and really happy that Corey gave us permission, and his agent, thank you, Russ, gave permission to put it online for a little bit. And then it's been done but I got to go to Austria because there was a production of it in Austria in German. To see, that was fun. And then a bunch of high schools and colleges have done their productions of it. I have a large cast version of it as well for like a high school to do, and people do crazy stuff with it. It's a really special show for me, and very relevant.
Yes. Josh, you do moonlight as a playwright. I wonder if people know that about you. You have a handful of adaptations.
Yeah. I'm not much. I mean, I've tried my hand at like writing a play from scratch, and they're not good. But I have written some adaptations, and mainly they're stories I want to tell as a director that the play doesn't quite exist in the way I want to do it. And so, you know, I wanted to do a play of Little Brother, and that's why I adapted it, because I wanted to direct it. You know, The Rover is the other one by the, you know, 17th century play by Alfred Bain, which, you know, it's a amazing, you know, restoration comedy by this, you know, the first professional female playwright to work in the English language. And she's a fascinating character. And I wrote a adaptation for 4 teenage girls acting it out in their bedroom on a sleepover, and which it sounds very weird, but it ends up being a way to draw out the themes of the play, which was about a girl using her imagination and dressing up in costumes to escape the fate of being married to somebody she doesn't want to get married to, and choose her own lover and her own future. So, you know, yeah, I've run a few. I did Ubu, an adaptation of Ubu Wall with Shotgun, Ubu for President, many years ago now, 12 years ago now. My gosh. Yeah. So a little bit.
Awesome.
Oh, what is this? What do we have here? This is another one of yours.
That is another one of mine. I directed Medea with African American Shakespeare Company in 2014 with Leontine Mbele Mbong as Medea. She's my muse.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Kari Moy there played Jason. He's one of our actors in the Flats. So yeah, you know, I love the Greeks. I got started doing the Greeks when I was not even an early career director, like a school director. Like I was still in college. Like, what is this directing thing? How can I have all the power? So I've done a lot of Greek plays. So that was also my second time doing Medea when I did it with African American shakes, and we had a great time.
Put that picture back up again, Amanda. Can we see that again? I want to see that picture again. And what about that? So where is this? It looks very contemporary for a Greek play. Tell us about your concept for this production.
Yeah, we did do it very contemporary. Courtney Flores, who's an Aurora alum, and will be on an upcoming episode with us, did the costumes. And what I told her was Real Housewives. I did this at a time when I was huge in the Real Housewives of Atlanta. So I was like, yeah, that chorus of Greek women, really wants to feel like Real Housewives. And if you watch any season of any city of Real Housewives, you quickly discover there are these archetypes. They're like this great model for these archetypes. So we kind of built each one around a kind of archetypal, you know, we had like the very pious church going housewife, the sort of like young, spunky wife. Kathleen Ridley was in that production. She played the nurse. Elizabeth Strong kind of doubled as the like tutor messenger, and also filled out the chorus. So yeah, and Bert, who was just our stage manager on The Children, he did the set for that, and that was at the Burial Clay, which is like an almost impossible space to direct in because they have these architectural columns that make sight lines a nightmare. So
in fact, theater veteran, you can handle columns.
Yes,
you worked in the Vals.
Yeah. So it was really great. We had a really great time. You know, they do student matinees there, African American Shakespeare. So it's great. And when you talk about a sort of like the I don't want to call them a non-traditional theater audience. They are a traditional theater audience. They go to theater that resonates for them. So we don't see them you know, all the time at ACT or Aurora or Berkeley Rep. But African American Shakes has a very loyal audience who are very vocally responsive. And so watching the play with that audience was so great. It really hit the mark, because to kind of layer this Real Housewives vibe on it and to have the audience really be verbally engaging with the play, it really did feel like watching reality TV.
Let me ask you, you asked me this, but I want to ask you, what do you love about directing? What brings you joy as a director?
I mean, I love everything. I don't know how to give a not pat or cliche answer. When I started theater, I thought I was going to be an actor. I wanted to be an actor. Thought I'd be in the ensemble of Broadway musicals and that sort of thing. And in my I was directing in high school, but only like for status, because like, oh, the advanced drama kids get to direct. So it was like a status symbol. But when I started directing in college, it was because I had gotten frustrated with the roles that I was getting as an actor. And I was like, how can I guide the vision more? And at that time, I thought non-musical plays, I thought were boring. Like, not in real life, but like in my mind, I had decided that non-musical plays were people like just two people talk to each other across from a table, blah, 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 boring. But my mentor, Edgardo de la Cruz, he was like, everything's a dance and everything is expressionistic. And so when I studied directing under him, I thought, oh, this is a whole new world. And at that time, Mary Zimmerman was doing some work at Berkeley Rep, Notebooks of Leonardo, Argonautica, Secret in the... So I was like, well, if I can do plays like that, where the actors are athletes, where they can be big and epic and choral, and there can be like polyphonic stuff happening. So basically, if I could direct plays like they're musicals, that's what I love. But I also found that directing is where I don't know how to say it, like, is where I feel like I can have a voice in the world. And like I said, for me, it's always been about social justice. The connection has always been there. So if I have a political leaning or a feeling about something, rather than, you know, just like try politics or be a lawyer or something, I've always used theater as an outlet for that. Like the first time I directed Medea, I had just had Jordan. I was a new mom. Andrea Evans had just drowned all her kids. And I was like, we need to talk about postpartum depression in this country. We need to really have this conversation. So I thought Medea was a way to do it. I learned that Medea probably isn't the way to have that conversation. But for me, the theater making has always been an outlet for the issues and the people, things that I felt passionate about. So I've always leaned into directing from that way. Like, what are the stories that need to be told? And for some reason, I'm audacious enough to think that I can be the person to tell them and that anyone will care.
I love that. I love the word audacious. Dawn, we're running out of time here, but I just want to tell you, I'm so glad that you are our associate artistic director and that I get to work with you every day. And I think you're amazing. I think you're a great director. You did such a good job with Bull in a China Shop. I'm so thrilled to see what you are going to continue to do with Aurora and in your life. I think you're just a wonderful person, and I feel so lucky to get to work with you every day.
Oh, I also feel lucky. I think we make a wonderful team, Josh. Wonderful team, Josh.
I think we complement each other really well, because I don't understand why you like musicals so much. But yeah, no, I think we're a great team. Should we wrap this one up? Any last thoughts?
Probably should. Well, this has just been and meeting with the playwrights for the flats and having a session with the actors have really been the highlights of this week. We often ask about joy. So that definitely has been the joy of this week.
Yeah, we're having some good stuff happening in those talks, those meetings.
Yeah. Well, we want to make sure that we remind folks that we are in the 2021 season and that memberships are out there and available and on sale, and they include wonderful things.
Yeah, I want to remind everybody that book club with Dawn talking about the complete works of August Wilson once a month is part of one of your membership benefits. So sign up for memberships for that. I'm also doing a monthly salon with different artists. Margot Hall is going to be my first guest for my monthly salon. You also get access to our original audio drama that we commissioned coming up in October, which is coming together very nicely. It's a extraordinary new story that speaks so directly to this present moment and the conversation that we're having going forward. I'm so excited to share that with all of you. There's going to be new play development readings coming up that we'll announce soon, all kinds of stuff. So please join us, purchase a membership, make a donation if you can. We also, every week, we like to give a shout out to an organization in our community that's doing good work. Outdoor Afro has become the nation's leading cutting edge network that celebrates and inspires Black connections and leadership in nature. We help people take better care of themselves, our communities, and our planet. Outdoor Afro is a national nonprofit organization with leadership networks around the country. With nearly 80 leaders in 30 states from around the country, we connect thousands of people to outdoor experiences who are changing the face of conservation. So come out in nature with them or be a partner to help them grow their work so that they can help lead the way for inclusion in outdoor recreation, nature, and conservation for all. And that is at outdoorafro.com.
Wonderful. As always, questions, suggestions for future guests, topics that you'd like to see on the show, please email us at connects@auroratheater.org. We'd love to hear from you. We take your input very seriously. Who do we have next week, Josh?
Next week, we have the Carpenters, Jim Carpenter and Cass Carpenter, a wonderful actor and costume designer whose work you have seen on our stage and all around the Bay Area many, many times. Jim Carpenter was, when I was, I think, 12 years old, I saw him play Prince Hal in Henry IV Part 1 at Berkeley Shakespeare in John Hinkle Park. And it was a very influential moment for me. And I'm so excited to get to speak with him next week. And of course, Cassandra Carpenter, who designed costumes Jim was in recently at Aurora. Really looking forward to that conversation with the two of them next week.
As am I. Until then, you all take care, be well, and thank you for staying connected.